Good afternoon and welcome to the program. I'm Mark Wallace, your host and facilitator of this edition of the People Show. I want to apologize for a late start. Um, I just got caught up in some very, very rough traffic trying to get back home to the studio to get started. Judge Murray is going to be joining us in just a few minutes, but I want to make sure that we certainly send our prayers and thoughts out to the family of our late Kate or Cook County Clerk Karen Yarborough, who made her transition on last week. And they're going to be having a memorial service for her tomorrow at Rockefeller Chapel. And that is going to be at 2:30 tomorrow afternoon on April the 14th. So if you are available to participate in that, and if you'd like to participate, the doors will open at 2 o'clock prior to the memorial service at Rockefeller Chapel. All right, a lot of things going on in the news, a lot of things going on. There is still this big controversy about this police shooting of Dexter Reed, a 26-year-old that was shot and killed by 5 Chicago tactical police officers. 4 of the police officers were actually involved in the actual shooting of 96 rounds into a vehicle, and certainly after he stepped out of the vehicle, continued to shoot and ultimately killed him. The circumstances around that case are very, very troubling, very, very troubling. And it is this ongoing problem that we continue to have with police officers that are abusing their powers, that are neglecting their professional responsibility, and certainly they are neglecting to restrain their police authority. Just because they have the power, just because they have the power to do certain things, does not mean that they should not exercise extreme care and restraint. Judge Murray and I talked about that last week, about the powers that the court has, that the power that the judge has. There is probably no more powerful person that can transform your life on earth under God except for then a judge. A judge has enormous latitude and enormous power. But as Judge Murray talked about it last week, that judges have to restrain that power. Just because you have the power to do certain things doesn't mean that you should always act on that power. People come into the courtroom, people have all kinds of challenges within their lives, experiences, frustrations, things that they have to deal with, and not understanding the process. And so sometimes it spills over in the courtroom, not understanding the decorum that needs to be kept. But the judge has the power to hold people into contempt, to put people, hold them, put them in custody. They just have a wide range of power. And sometimes people go in and completely are disrespectful to the court, disrespectful to the judge. But as the judge said, you can't take it personally. You can't take these things personally. You have to understand that you have this authority, but you also have an enormous responsibility to restrain the use of that authority. And in some cases where you might end up abusing that authority. So It's really important. And we have this problem within the police departments all over this country. And here we are again in Chicago, March 21st. They claim that they were stopping him for a seatbelt violation. We absolutely know that that is not the case. Hang on just one second. Okay, Judge Murray is having some problems trying to get in. I'm gonna have to go out. I'm gonna have to come back. So please just hang on, hang in there with us. So I have to figure out how to go back to send. Okay, I'm back. Hopefully, Judge Murray will be able to get into the studio. We've been having some problems, and of course, when you're running late, everything that could go wrong will go wrong. And but we're going to eventually make this work. So hopefully, you all will come on in. And I know that there were probably people who tried to get in because we were supposed to go on at 1 o'clock, who may have come in and waited and left. So if you are still around, please come on in. Come on in. Come on into to the program. But talking about these police shooting, and I want to have that conversation with Judge Murray a little bit. I'm not sure how much of that he can talk about, but we're certainly going to talk about some of the legal ramifications related to that. And but I had the opportunity to review all of the videos that were released, the videos of the 5 officers that were initially involved, and then the videos of all of the other officers that came onto the scene of the videos. And I spent a great deal of time looking at all of those videos from all of those different angles. And it certainly, and I also, in looking at the videos, I observed the videos, looked at the videos first. Then I had conversations with police officers, seasoned police officers, commanders, sergeants, police officers who were retired, recently retired. And all of them said that these police officers completely abandoned the protocols as it relates to a traffic stop, since that's what they said it was, a traffic stop. And they completely abandoned it. All right, sorry about that, folks. Judge Murray is having some connection problems as well. But at any rate, so looking at all the videos, talking with the police officers, then going back and looking at the videos and look to see all of the violations that these five police officers committed in this alleged stop that they claim was a stop. This is what they said it was. They said it was an alleged stop because they saw that he did not have a seatbelt on. Now, no reasonable person looking at those videos, examining, would conclude that five tactical officers could see a person in a car with dark tinted windows that they did not have their seatbelt on. And from the direction that they came, did not appear that they were stopping somebody for a seatbelt violation. This appears as though they were seeking or they sought him out. It also appears as though maybe somebody tipped them off and made an allegation, whatever it may be, that maybe he had a gun, he was carrying an illegal gun or something. But they sought him out from what it appears on a traffic stop. Typically, a traffic stop is an officer who observes something and they're following a person, not someone who gets in a car and it takes them a minute and 20 seconds to go all around looking for this person, because you could see that they are in their vehicle and they are driving, trying to find this person. That's what it appears that they're doing in all of the videos. And I've observed all the videos. I've looked at all of the videos, and I have problems, real problems with this. Now, if this was in fact a traffic stop, Dexter Reed should not be dead. Another black young man that was allegedly stopped, according to the press release, for a seatbelt violation is dead from four police officers firing 96 shots in the direction of the police officers who got hit. You could see in his video he was not able to fire his weapon because he got hit. And so now they say that Dexter Reed fired upon them first. Now, it is never a good outcome. It is never going to be a good outcome with someone who is shooting at a police officer or police officers. That's not going to end up well for the person 99.9% of the time. It is not going to end up in a good outcome for that person. It is never somebody to shoot at a police officer. It just is not. However, this is a stop that should not have been made according to the traffic stop protocols. Now, I am going to request, I'm going to go to the police academy. I am going to request the procedures and the training procedures for the protocols for traffic stops. And I'm going to try to see if I can't get some retired officer to come on to talk about this. And we should not allow for people to conflate what happened with Dexter Reed and what happened to two young men who were one young man who was fired upon going to pick up his twin brothers by someone who said they were afraid, and he was shot in the head. Or another police officer who shot a young man who had a toy weapon who was raising his hand. In Ohio. We should not conflate these at all with what people like to do, is to conflate what police officers are doing with other things that are going on within the Black community or with Black young men who may be some wayward in conducting themselves and criminal activity. No, don't conflate this. We have a problem where it is an overwhelming amount of shootings, deaths of Black young men by police. Now, in this case, they said he had a gun. In this case, they said he fired upon them. It's never a good idea to do that. It's never a good idea to do that. Hold on one second, please. Okay, Judge Murray is not going to be able to get on right now, but I want to talk about this anyway. I want to talk about this, and I certainly hope that more people will come on and engage in this conversation about this, because we're going to talk about this. I'm going to also talk about this with some other people. I'm going to get Martin Johnson. We're going to have a conversation about it. But I think we need to really do some real investigation. We need to get the facts. We need to get the information. We need to know what the protocols are. We need to understand what the policies are. Because based on what I was told by police officers, that these police officers completely violated traffic stop protocols. One, you jumped in a car, you turned on your body cams video, but you didn't turn on your audio. Then it took you a minute and 20 seconds to get to this person. When you got to this person, you had your guns drawn. On a traffic stop, you're not supposed to have your guns drawn. You went to the car, you asked the person to roll their windows down. They did roll their windows down, but they rolled their windows back up and they locked their doors. They didn't know who you were. And that person, according to what I was told, this was what they would call a passive non-compliance or passive resistance. When that happens at that time, there should not be force. There should not be force. You are some senior officer on the scene should direct the other officers to stand down. You stand down and you call for a supervisor. None of this happened. None of this happened. So the point is that Dexter Reed is dead, not just because Dexter Reed fired upon police officers. Yes, according to the reports, that's what happened. And you fire upon a police officer, it's never going to be a good outcome. But should there have been a shooting at all, if they did not seek him out, if they had acted within the protocol and the policies, they would never have chased him in the first place. They would never have chased him in the first place. If they were suspicious about something that he was carrying illegally, you get the license plate, you talk to a supervisor, and you get direction from your supervisor as to how to proceed. Now, this is what I'm told by a retired sergeant and a current commander. And I'm going to try to see if the retired sergeant would be willing to come on to talk about this. But it appears to me, overwhelmingly appears to me, that these police officers were out of control and made some bad decisions that led to an escalated situation that they escalated by continuing to try to force this person, Dexter Reed. They were pulling on the door handles when he had locked the door. Then what, according to these other police officers, a district commander, two very seasoned police officers, and one retired sergeant, that these police officers should have retreated. It should never have gotten to that. There should never have been a shooting. And they escalated that situation, and Dexter Reed is dead. Now, nobody is justifying shooting at a police officer. Well, certainly I'm not justifying what he did. He should not have been shooting at a police officer, but we have to look at everything that was done that led up to them even pulling him over. If they violated protocol prior to getting there, then that means it should not have ever happened. If they weren't supposed to do the chase, they didn't tell the truth about what they were chasing him about. It doesn't appear that they are telling the truth about that. Statements that they've made are somewhat sketchy. Statements are somewhat sketchy. Looks like Judge Murray finally got in. All right, so we're going to bring Judge Murray in, and we're going to get started. For those of you who would have legal questions, we're going to deal with our question of the day. But those of you who have questions, we're going to talk about some other legal things. I'm going to talk about some things. I know we got started late, and there might have been many of you that it came on, and you went off because we were not on, but we are going to move forward. All right, joining me now is the Cook County Circuit Court Judge Leonard Murray. Judge Murray, welcome. Finally got in.
Good afternoon, Mark. Yeah, it was a challenge, but finally I broke through.
All right, fantastic. All right, okay. All right, listen, I'm not sure, and because I don't want to compromise your position. Are you able to talk about at all, because I've been talking about it a bit before you came on, are you able to discuss this latest police shooting that was just released?
I think it's probably too early in the process to venture down that road. Plus, I don't know exactly what 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 area you might want to explore. So maybe that may be a conversation we need to have offline in terms of
Okay,
what that discussion can look like,
that's fair.
uh, and then we can
Yeah,
go from there.
that's fair. All right. I did have an opportunity to review um, the reports and all that sort of stuff. But yes, I think it's a good idea we have that conversation offline, and then
Okay.
we'll revisit that. It's a real important issue. Um, okay, so let's talk about O.J. Simpson situation. All right, there's been a lot of conversation about the O.J. Simpson uh, uh, case that's been going on now, what, 30 years. And of course, he was found not guilty for murdering Nicole Brown Simpson, his former wife, and her friend. Um, um, I forget his name. Uh,
Ryan Brown, I think.
no, I forget his name. It just escapes me at this point.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I
but,
can't
but
recall either.
but at any rate, so of course, and then there was new evidence that came up, and they had a civil trial against them, and presented that new evidence, and they got a judgment against them for some $30 million that is now ballooned to more than $100 million because of the penalties and the interest that accrued. The families only have gotten to this date about $132,000 from him because they haven't been able to attach that to anything. They couldn't go after his retirement. Now, in celebrities, a lot of celebrities, in their death, their estates make more money in their deaths than they did when they were alive. I'm not sure that the same thing will apply for O.J. Simpson, but because they were not able to attach to his pension or retirements and that sort of thing, But if his estate earns a lot of money, because it has to come into his estate, the O.J. Simpson estate, will the family be able to collect whatever money comes into that estate, that because it is outside of his pension or retirement? Will they be able to do that and easily collect whatever revenues that come into that?
Well, because of his death, he's no longer receiving a protected retirement benefit. And typically that would end at death, especially here since he doesn't have a surviving spouse, as far as I know. He wasn't married at the time of his death. So there could be no claim on behalf of a person in that status, since there wasn't one. Um, and that would likely make his assets available to be attached by creditors. Um, and I know you may be aware that he moved from California to Florida
Mhm.
because there was more protection uh, for him down there than in California in terms of his financial position.
Right.
Um, so he made that move, so he was protected there. And the difference between the original judgment and what's now claimed to be owed is a function of. Hold on a second. It's a function of the accrual of interest. I'm not aware of whether or not California had a failure to pay penalty imposed on civil judgments. Um, Illinois doesn't have such a provision, but interest does continue to accrue on unpaid judgments. Uh, so I cannot envision any protection for his estate from creditors at this point. They those folks would in fact uh, um, be ahead of uh, of of his heirs, his children.
Well, there I read an article that his name is Ron Goldman. That was his name.
Yeah, Ron
Ron
Goldman.
Goldman. Yes.
Yeah,
I read an article that the families will be aggressively going after his estate and any earnings that he could potentially get in his death. So, because we were having some discussion and some debate about that, and I was saying to another um, a friend of mine, because they thought that his attorneys would be able to hide his assets, and I said no, the attorneys can't hide his assets because they have to come to the estate first. And therefore, if it comes to the estate first and the creditors have a judgment, the creditors are first in line. So the attorneys, in fact, the attorneys would be violating the law if they try to move those assets into some sort of shadow company or something like that. I think they would be risking their license.
yeah, that would be a risky maneuver by them. Um Plus, you're right. Uh, the moment that he died, um, whatever he owned would flow to his estate from whatever source um, it would come from. Um, and unless there was some sort of trust set up, um, whereby certain assets would go to the trust um, upon his death, but even there, I think it would involve likely a claim by a creditor for payment. Um, so unless the transfer had occurred uh, to the trust for the benefit of someone else during his lifetime, then I think it's subject to creditors' claims. And even as far as I know about the post judgment process, um, he had to disclose where his assets were, and then potential sources for future assets and income. So it's merely a matter of now just uh, tracking those down to determine where they are and whether or not there are any assets that were not available prior to his death that are available now.
Right. Right. Well, that's going to be very that's going to be interesting to see just what it is. But I know that they're going to aggressively go after that. I couldn't imagine what he could possibly. Um, but who knows? I mean, he could have some substantial investments. But you're right. You point out that at the time of his death, whatever assets that he had, and even if he had a trust set up for those to be transferred at that time, I would imagine that those protections go away because there are now assets of his that he is trying to transfer to somebody else. And I think that a creditor would step in front of whoever it is that he was um, trying to transfer those assets to.
Now, the other thing that's interesting here is his heirs, of course, at this point, since his wife, uh, was murdered, um, would go to his children, and those, of course, are the children that he fathered by Nicole. I can't remember her last name, middle name.
Nicole, yeah, Nicole Brown.
Brown Simpson. Those children, I think there were two children uh, that they had during their marriage.
Yes,
Um, and then the children by the prior relationship. And as I know there was a son, and I
right.
think there was a daughter as well.
Yeah, I think he had.
So,
I think he had a son, a son and a daughter,
yeah,
in
so,
his from his first marriage.
right. So those are his heirs. Those are his surviving heirs.
Right.
Um, so uh, beyond the issue of the judgment, in the judgment, um, I don't know. I don't know who the plaintiffs were in that action. I thought it was brought on behalf of the children by his former wife's Nicole Brown Simpson's family,
Hmm.
uh, except for the Brian Goldman, who of course was not uh, uh, related to her. Um, but those claims, the Goldman claims, of course, are separate and apart. Um, but then the claim that was brought on behalf of Nicole Brown Simpson's family, I thought was for the benefit of the children, because those would have been the parties injured, damaged by what occurred. Um, but I don't know that the parents as such would have a claim for injury by virtue of what apparently the civil trial concluded he was responsible for. But that's something, I didn't really follow that litigation closely at the
Hmm.
time, um, uh, because it didn't seem as if um, there was any much of a question about responsibility there, from based on what the evidence was in a civil case. Now, of course, it's important to know that the standard of proof is different um,
Right.
in civil versus criminal. Criminal, of course, is beyond a reasonable doubt, and typically civil judgments are preponderance of the evidence. So it's a lesser standard of proof required for civil recovery. Um, so, I didn't follow the civil trial closely, um, but they did recover, were awarded the judgment amount that you suggested, and now multiple years later, you've got the accrual of interest uh, against that original judgment, um, and that continues until such time as it is somehow paid off, or it's realized that all the available assets have been exhausted, and there's nothing further that can be recovered to liquidate that claim.
Yeah. Now I'm just reading here, and this is that's coming from celebrities that says, according to celebritynetworth.com, which are not always accurate sites, a site tracks the wealth of high profile people, including Simpson. The former Buffalo Bills running back had just $3 million to his name when he died. And that could just be assets that he had in his name.
Yeah,
Um, so, and so I would imagine that they certainly, Ron Goldman's attorneys certainly says that they intend on going after every possible asset that they can go after within in his estate.
sure.
So, yeah, um, but that is going to be very interesting to see what they find. I believe in that he had far more assets than what they know. I think he accumulated uh, a very a large um, uh, amount of money over the period of times that he was in movies and doing all of his Hertz commercials and all that sort of stuff. So I'm sure that they shelter some stuff somewhere. But uh, these attorneys seem very, very determined to make sure uh, that they go after those assets. So that'll be very interesting to see how that all takes shape.
And the other interesting thing here will be you've got the two claimants here. So then, uh, how would that be dispersed in terms of what assets are recovered? And again, um, the claimants for a substantial part of what occurred here in terms of the judgment were his children, the action brought by grandparents on behalf of the children.
Hmm.
Uh, the children that he had with Nicole Brown Simpson. Um, that's all going to be interesting. The other thing is that he died, as I understand it, as a resident of Florida.
Hmm.
Um, so then, how did I'm not familiar with how their laws play out in terms of recovery from an estate. Is probably not very different than it is most places. Um, but they did provide some protection for him um, during his life from creditors who were pursuing collection of the judgment.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, we certainly will keep an eye on it. It's going to be a very interesting watch to see. I think the whole situation was a very interesting one that um, will be talked about for a very, very long time. So let me get to the question of the day. That if a person has, and we talked about, if a person has a car accident, and the person who is responsible for the car accident that strikes another person's vehicle, and the cost of the repairs of that vehicle exceeds the value of the vehicle that was damaged, is the person responsible for the total amount of the damages, or are they responsible for paying them for the market value of the car that in reasonable conditions prior to the damage?
I would say in most instances it's going to be the value of the vehicle at the time of the loss. And the theory behind that is that you want to put the injured party in the same position that they were before the claim occurred. So that would very likely be the value of the vehicle at the time of the collision. Now, an argument can be made, for example, that um, if you look up the so-called blue book value for a vehicle on any given day, taking into account its make, model, and year, there are um, resources out there that would suggest to you what that number should be.
Hmm.
However, as you know, there's certain vehicles that, at least based on where they would fall in a blue book, have more value than that because of same factors, make, model, and condition, year. Um, so, so in that instance, if it's a valuable uh, vehicle because of its longevity, condition, and so forth, uh, then the argument may be made that the recovery here should be the cost to restore it to the condition that it was in at the time of the collision. And that could be substantially more than what the blue book value would suggest its value is at the time of the collision.
So what you're talking about is if somebody has a car that may be a classic car that they have invested a substantial amount of money in, of 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 revitalizing that vehicle or rebuilding that vehicle, and it's a beautiful vehicle, but it still would never be have the value, um it the or the cost of repairing that will exceed the value of that car. So in some cases you're saying that that could potentially be an argument for them recovering whatever those damages are, even though it may exceed the value of the vehicle.
Yeah, the restoration cost
Yes,
uh, for that vehicle,
right.
which could very well be um, more than its value based on typical indices for car valuation.
Okay. Uh, Another question. This is related to red light camera tickets and all kinds of tickets. Now, when people get red light camera tickets, um, and the question is that when you get a ticket, right? Um, why is it that only when you get a ticket, that when you want to contest that ticket, and you go to an administrative hearing and they find you liable, but you have 35 days that you can go and you can uh, file for an administrative review, but within 25 days, the ticket will double. Why is it that why doesn't the clock stop on that action when in fact every other court proceeding that someone is in, um, whatever the judgment is not enforced until that case has been fully adjudicated?
Well, you raised two different issues there, though. W- w- uh, uh, your last statement was about enforcement, and under the city code, if you contest the validity of a outcome or finding a liable at the administrative hearing section that is run by the city of Chicago, uh, then administratively their rules provide that if you don't pay within that 25-day period, it doubles automatically. In most instances, not every ticket doubles, because I know uh, some years ago, because of the fine associated with failure to display a city sticker, um, if my memory's right, that fine was $200, and of course, if it doubled, it would make it $400. But they changed that so that now if you don't pay a failure to display city sticker um, violation, then I believe the additional fine is $50. It's not 200. But of course, and I tell folks who come in that uh, you may well continue to get notices from the city about attempting to collect that ticket, but it actually should stop by the city's own ordinance. They should discontinue collection efforts once they become aware that there is a court action that has been filed seeking review of that administrative finding a liable. It doesn't work in every instance. And the other thing is that while some people will act promptly in terms of by promptly, I mean they don't wait until the 35th day to file their petition for review. They may do it the same day because you're not prohibited from filing the same day as you receive that finding a liable. Um, so in that instance, you may well be in court before the 25 days comes around, and therefore you won't be aware that the city has may continue to pursue collection, even though the ordinance provides that it should stay those attempts. And normally, uh, as you know, I do the intake on all those tickets, all the administrative hearing matters. I will suggest to Corp Counsel that given the fact that this case is pending, the city's collection efforts should cease, given its own ordinance. Um, but of course, uh, I don't know how well that message gets across, but at least in terms of the court action, if that complaint comes forward, I will always suggest to the Corp Counsel they need to advise uh, the clerk's office, that's where those notices come from, in finance, that they should cease any collection effort until this case is resolved. Because uh, if the vehicle owner is found, if the finding a liable is reversed, then of course there's no obligation there. Uh, but of course, if it's not, then you may be facing the prospect of having to pay double. But there are some leniencies that are possible, um, even given that situation. You just have to know to ask.
Okay. Um, that's good information. Good information on that. Um, I had someone who contacted me about their real estate um, their real estate taxes, and they have a building that is in the same area. In fact, there's an identical building um, just down the street from them in the same area. And that person's taxes are half the amount of his taxes. And he says that he has gone to look and see. Of course, the municipality has their own sets, but he has gone to see if and why his taxes are that way. And even the people in the assessor's office says that there's something wrong here, but yet the board of review denied his appeal. And I believe that they denied, and this is my opinion, I believe that they denied his appeal because the difference is he did not have an appeal. He did not have an attorney representing him. Because his property is owned in his name, his personal name, and it's not into a corporation. So the board of review said that if you have a property and it's in a corporation's name, you have to have an attorney to represent you in an appeal. But they denied his claim. Is there some legal action that they have by way that they could either bypass or challenge the Board of Review in court?
Sure. Um, the Board of Review is an administrative agency. So if you disagree with any of their rulings, you have the right to file a petition for review, just as you do with matters coming from the city's administrative hearings section. It's litigation, and of course, the question would be whether or not there was a error made in terms of denying the petition that was filed to have the tax bill adjusted. And if the facts are as you suggested here, a similar property, um, um, features are the same. In fact, it sounds if it's certainly in the same neighborhood, if it's in the same block, then how do you explain the fact that they're not assessed the right way? And of course, we may not know all the facts here because it may well be that it's not based on assessment, but there are other factors that appear in that tax bill um, that probably most of us don't pay attention to. So you really have to look at it and find out why there's the difference between um, these two properties, these two similar or same properties.
Yeah, well, I looked at his tax bill because at one time he owned both of the buildings.
Mm,
The two buildings, they're right next door to each other. So he owned them both, and he sold one of the buildings. The only difference in the building that he maintained is that it is one unit. The other building has 8. The building that he maintained has 9. That's the only difference in the two properties. The square footages of the building is almost identical, and certainly they're in the same location. But yet his taxes are doubled what the taxes of the other property is. And like I said, he did not use a tax appeal attorney,
hmm
and the Board of Review denied it. And I have my own opinion about that. But um, even at the assessor's office, they said that you know on balance, there's something wrong when you have two properties that are just about identical, same square footage of land, same square footage of building. Relatively, there's only like maybe a few feet different because of the one additional unit, but the overall square footage of the building is about the same. The only difference is that one unit. But what you're saying is that he can file a petition in the circuit court for a review of that. So, in reviewing that, where would he file that? Where would that be filed? Would that be filed in your division? Where would that be
mm,
filed?
No, it wouldn't be in the housing section. It's probably either in law or the county division would be my guess in terms of where those cases would be litigated.
Mm, yes. Okay. I will certainly share that with him because I think it will be a very interesting argument.
Yeah, and
Um,
he still has that 35-day requirement under there's a state statute that deals with administrative review, and it sets forth the timeline for initiating an action, and that timeline is 35 days from um, the order. Now that gets to be a little tricky too because um, unlike what happens at administrative hearing um, with the city, where you typically will leave the hearing with a copy of the order in those instances. It may well be that before the Board of Review, or even the assessor, because you also have a right to challenge an assessment. Um, you may not walk away from the hearing occasion with a copy of the order. So it gets tricky sometimes in terms of when service is deemed made in that instance. But typically, as long as you do it within 35 days of the last hearing date, you should be okay.
Okay. All right. Um, let's see what we have. Let's see. We got a couple minutes. I want to talk about. I had. There's one thought that I had that I wanted to bring up. It'll come to me. It'll come. That will come back to me. It escaped me. I've been thrown all off since we got started late. I got in late. You had some technical issues. Um, so, um, boy, there was there was something related to that I wanted to follow up on. Oh, this was an appraisal situation. I'm selling a property, and the property went under contract for the list price. The appraiser appraised my property, underappraised it by $55,000. $202,000 they came in with the appraisal. I sent it to an appraiser to review it. The appraiser who reviewed it said uh, there were all kinds of errors in the appraisal because he said that either this person was trying to do some, racial bias here, and or the appraiser was uh, geographically incompetent. So anyway, I rejected it. We wrote a rebuttal, but because there's no oversight in the state, and I've asked that we have put some kind of oversight in place. But when you write a rebuttal, it goes back to the same person. It's almost like somebody has a judge and they want that judge to be recused or replaced or substituted. They have to go to that judge first, right? To have that judge substituted. But in with an appraisal, and even after that, at least there's another process. But with an appraisal, there is no other person. It goes back to the same person who actually did the appraisal. That you write the rebuttal and you send it to that appraisal, and that appraisal looks at it, and they're the ones. The final decision stops there. So we sent it, and of course, that appraiser denied reconsidering the value. Well, of course, I rejected it, and so what we did is that the other appraisers who I had to review it, he said, "Look, these are the comps that you give to the appraiser that comes next." So we rejected that, and they went to a completely different lender. In fact, they went to a bank, Huntington Bank, by the way. And Huntington Bank, their appraisal appraised my property at $2,000 greater than the list price. So, in these cases, there's been so much of this that's been going on in our community. What is the legal remedy that somebody may have for bringing an action against appraisers because we don't have any oversight of this type of practice?
Well, you would the appraiser is an agent for the lending institution uh, where you've applied for the loan. And there are standards and regulations at the federal level that deal with the issue of bias in appraisal real estate. In fact, it's a very hot topic now. And as I understand it, at least the current director of the federal agency locally uh, has met with representatives of Dearborn Real Estate um, board to talk about the issue. The fact that in minority communities, properties are being undervalued, and it tinges on a racial element in that regard. But there is some effort to take up the issue there. But I believe there are federal requirements in terms of unbiased appraisals. Um, and if you believe that has occurred, it's likely an action that can be brought against the lending institution where the loan application has been made. Um, Let me comment on something though. You said, Mark, in terms of rejecting the appraiser's conclusion, and that is in court. If you would like a change of judge, it is possible, even though you have to initiate the request with the judge who is then assigned the case. Uh, and there are two circumstances. One is a change as of right, and that occurs when the judge presiding has not made a decision that affects the rights of parties in the situation. You know, prior to judgment, but something significant in terms of ruling that has not been made uh, during the pendency of the case. Uh, in that circumstance, you can get a change of judge. The other is situations where uh, dovetailing onto the appraisal situation is where you believe that there's been bias or something else that has occurred in the case that is inappropriate. Uh, when that occurs, the judge sitting on the case or assigned the case does not hear that motion. It is sent to another judge to determine whether or not there are grounds for transfer based on uh, bias or some other conduct that has occurred in the case by the judge that would affect his or her ability to be fair and impartial.
Right. Now, the appraisers, even though that they are an agent of um, the lending institution, they're actually independent, right? They're independent who, and they have this new. Well, it's not so new now, but they have, and I forget what it's called, but they have like this. Um, all the appraisers are chosen by somebody independently. Like the bank doesn't select the appraisal; they order an appraisal, and it comes through a group, and they assign it to an appraiser. But many of these appraisers don't know the communities that they're going to appraise in. But in our case, in the Black community, there's been, and as a matter of fact, I just recently read the study that where the Federal Housing Authority, they released some 47 million appraisals that there was an analysis done on by these researchers. And in those 47 million, they found where they had similar homes, same style homes, same socioeconomic um, makeup of the property owners. The only difference between is that one property owner was Black and the other property owner was white. And in their findings, they found that it was a persistent, um, consistent practice of them undervaluing homes of Black borrowers or Black owners by some 20 to 30% in a lot of cases. And so there was this one case where there was a family who had bought a home and they were refinancing their home. They had done some in to get a lower rate, and the appraiser came in and appraised their property for I think it was $750,000, when every other home in that area similar to that property was worth about 1.2 to 1.5. So they rejected that appraisal. And what they did was, they had a friend who was married to um, a white man. And what they did is they removed all of the pictures out of their homes of themselves and put the photographs of this white family in their house and had the house reappraised, and the house appraised for some $500,000 more.
Wow. Wow.
So this is a consistent practice. So I spoke with State Senator LG Sims on last week, and I said to him, we need to have an appraisal oversight commission in place. Appraisals need to be held accountable if they are engaging in this kind of practice, and they are found to be doing this. They need to there needs to be either some sanctions imposed, or there has to be some consequences for appraisers that to deter this kind of action. Right now, there's nothing in place to hold appraisers accountable. Nothing. It's really all of the decision is within the hands of the appraiser.
Yeah, that would appear to make sense, given the data that's been collected about the disparity in valuations from minority property owners to white.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right. Well, listen, that's going to do it for us for this week, folks. We'll be back next week, and look, we'll be back hopefully on time and without any glitches. I think I put too many things close together. I had to go way out to Glenview and forgot about they were doing the construction. And there are several lanes that closed down. So it took me well over an hour and 20 minutes to get back, when it normally takes me about 40 minutes. And then, of course, we had some technical issues with Judge Murray trying to get in. But next week, we'll be right back here, the same place at 1 o'clock, and we'll be taking all of your legal questions. Now, you can email me. You can email me at markjwus@gmail.com. If you want to email me your questions earlier in the week, we'll compile them, and then your questions will be read off on next week's program. Otherwise, you join us and you can your question in the chat, and we'll see it and grab it and ask the question of the judge. All right, Judge Murray, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate it. And we'll have that conversation offline about that and see how we can broach that conversation, because it is a very unfortunate situation, another unfortunate situation. But I'll have a conversation with you offline with all the information that I had, and maybe I can provide you with that information also.
Okay.
All right. Okay. All right, folks. So that's going to do it for us for this week for this edition of the People. That you join me on Monday night at 7 o'clock for another edition of the People Show on intellectualradio.com. And from at 7 o'clock, we will be talking with Kim Delaney from the DuSable Museum, and we're going to have another one of the principals that was relieved of his position, yet still has not been given the reason why on the Monday night edition of the People Show. So make sure you tune in for that show. We'll talk to you and see you then.